People think that GPT-5 is going to change everything. Artificial general intelligence, the end of search, and massive disruption. But chances are it's probably not. Now, the real shift happened at GPT-2, and everything since, including GPT-5, has just been iterations on that earlier model. And let me show you why. So we need to take a look at this overall timeline of the GPT models. You can see here that GPT-2 was released in February of 2019. So GPT-2 was the very first model that was capable of writing multi-sentence and human-like text reliably. Before GPT-2, AI could complete a sentence or mimic very short patterns, but with GPT-2, suddenly you could feed it an entire prompt and you can get back a paragraph that sounded, if not smart, at least fluent. So it was the first time that AI truly felt generative. Now, you can see an example here of AI talking about itself. And you can see that there are a few small, issues and errors like these, but nothing tremendously wrong, which is why I say about fluency. It looks good, even if it's not quite perfect. Now, after, of course, GPT-2, we got GPT-3. Now, GPT-3 wasn't any kind of new intelligence. Instead, it was just a massive scale-up of GPT-2. So what they did is they scaled up the parameters from 1.5 billion for GPT-2 all the way up to 175 billion for GPT-3. You can kind of think of parameters perhaps a little bit like data points the model uses to learn where things go together, such as, which words should come next or come after others. What is the meaning of a sentence that's being said to it? And then what should be next in how it responds? What is the next token it should select in order to write words in response to whatever prompt you've put into it? Now, the more parameters the model has, the better it's going to be at making more accurate and nuanced predictions. Now, the same idea applies to generating code, to creating images in models like DALL-E or Midjourney, or even interacting in more complex ways that we're not going to go into in this video. So GPT-3 brought us to 175 billion parameters, which meant it could do tasks pretty well, like summarizing, translating, or writing essays for school kids, and it can do it much better than GPT-2. But again, while it was more scale, it was the same fundamental architecture of GPT-2. Now, next we had GPT 3.5 that came nearly 2 years later. Now, GPT 3.5 wasn't, again, any big improvement or change on the underlying model. Instead, what it did is it added instruction tuning and improved alignment. Now, what those things mean is for instruction tuning, it meant that it's trained to better follow human instructions. So instead of just predicting the next word, it learned to respond to prompts, such as explain what lightning is, or write a summary of mice and men. And it could do that in a way that really matched the user's intent. And this matters because it made the model feel a lot more interactive and useful, more like an assistant as opposed to just a text generation engine. Now, the other part of this was improved alignment. Now, what this means is it was able to make the model more helpful, hallucinate less, and do things such as saying, I don't know the answer to that question. Now, what you can think of is this is almost like making it more aligned with human values and expectations. If we're talking to a person, we might expect them to answer, I don't know, to a question that we ask if they don't know the answer. Whereas if you're talking to a probability engine that's just trying to respond with whatever the correct response is, and you say, what's my birthday, without it knowing the answer, it might predict that your birthday is, for example, the most common birthday in the world. Why? Well, that might be how it works. And so what it does is it was able to understand what are its limitations and then improve and do that. So GPT-3 was powerful but kind of unpredictable. And GPT 3.5 was able to be a lot more consistent, more helpful, and feel like you were talking to another person instead of just talking to an AI language engine. Now, exactly 1 year later, we got GPT-4. GPT-4 introduced some things such as multimodality, meaning it could take in both text but also images. It lengthened the context windows, meaning that it could handle much longer inputs, which is up to 128,000 tokens, if I remember correctly, with GPT-4 Turbo. And that meant you could do things like upload an entire research paper, and it could read and understand and comprehend the entire paper without being limited in its ability to hold that in its, you can almost think of it as like short-term memory. Or, for example, you give it access to a code base, and it can now write some code while understanding a big portion of the code base. Same for books or anything else like this. And it can take all the concepts and ideas and start to reason with them. GPT 3.5 was limited, much more so, I think for 16,000 tokens, whereas GPT-4 Turbo was able to do 128,000. So there was a big difference in its, you can call it short-term memory or context, that it's able to then work much better. It also added things like reasoning. So you may notice that if you ask ChatGPT to do something such as, what is 22 times 13, it's not just going to go and try and pick, as it did in the past, from its memory to say, do I have anywhere in my training data 22 times 13, and then return the answer. Instead, it recognizes this is a maths problem. And what it does is it takes that, it puts it into Python code, and then it is able to operate almost like a calculator and return back the correct answer. So it's able to do more complex reasoning steps like this, or, as you may have seen again in ChatGPT, if you're using any of the O series models, is it can take your initial prompt, go away and say, what does the user actually want me to do? Okay, define some tasks for itself and operate in a more agentic structure. So GPT-4, again, was a big improvement on the prior models, but not to anything to do with the big underlying architecture. Instead, what it was an improved refinement, but not any kind of big shift in the architecture. Every step in this timeline has been a step that's improved performance. It's made it more safe for users to use, made it easier to use, but they've also been all built on the same transformer foundation that was established in GPT-2. So, what does this tell us about GPT-5, which is expected to land in August of 2025? Well, what we are expecting is that GPT-5 is going to combine the standard GPT models as well as these more specialized reasoning models mentioned for GPT-4. So it's going to become better at logical thinking. It's going to have an even larger context than GPT-4. Rumor has it it's going to be up to 1 million tokens, which is enough for it to really understand, for example, an entire code base, which has previously been limited or struggles to do. It's also going to have better integration with tools such as web search, or deep research. So it's going to be able to go and do the task that you're looking for better, but it is not going to be general intelligence, nor is it going to be operating on any kind of radical new architecture. So all of this is useful, but it's not any kind of big breakthrough new brain. It's GPT 4.5 with some improvements. So what does this mean for you? Well, if you're building tools or products or any kind of workflows with AI, GPT-5 isn't going to make your app obsolete. It might make it faster, it might make it more accurate, and it might make it more stable. But the real innovation is going to come from what you're building around the model. So focus on how can you chain different tools together? How can you better structure your prompts? How do you design great UX and talk to your customers? And so you can build something that's really easy and intuitive to use that adds lots of value How do you handle errors? All of these things, which are about product and product design, are going to start mattering more and more and more because the AI is going to become more and more capable. So as the AI becomes more capable, your defensive or competitive moat is not going to be in the model, never has been unless you are OpenAI. It's going to be around the product that you're building around these models. So GPT-5 is not any kind of revolution, and it's more so the next step in this refinement. It's a bit like a smarter, more stable coworker, but not any kind of breakthrough in intelligence.